Part 1. Read these words. See, she, su, shoe, sip, ship, s, ash, ras, rush, puss, push, shit, show, washing, Swedish, shell, shake machine, English, shop, show, special, shrunk, shut, finished, shouldn't, sure, wish, demonstration, television, treasure, garage, casual, clothes, budget, Asia, measuring tape, unusual collision, ships, chips, sheep, cheap, sherry, cherry, shop, chop, cash, catch, wash, watch, children, butcher shop, Mrs. Church, check, chump, chops, much, treasure, shoulders, which, cheaper, a delicious chicken, choose, children's lunch, orange juice, rich child, which job, village jail, watch chain, college chess, large gentleman, which chair, large cherries, huge jam jar, how much cheese, teach German. Part 2. Read this text. More US adults who do not already have children are saying they are unlikely to ever have them. A new Pew Research Center survey finds finding that could draw renewed attention to the risk of declining birth rates for industrialized nations. Experts are concerned that the US birth rate, which has declined for the sixth straight year, might not fuel enough population growth on its own to keep the future economy afloat and fund social programs. Women between the age of 18 to 49 and men between 18 and 59 who said they are not parents were asked the question, thinking about the future, how likely is it that you will have children someday? In October, 26% of them said it is very likely, a 6-point drop from 2018 from 32% answered very likely. Meanwhile, the share of Americans who answered not so likely in 2021 grew to 21% compared to 16% in 2018 when asked for a reason. 56% of childless adults who said it is not at all or not too likely they will ever have children said it's because they just don't want them. That's a change from in 2018 when 63% of childless adults in this category said it was because they had no desire for children. This time around 43% cited other reasons including medical issues, economic or financial reasons, and lack of partner help out of the quicksand. How, how the child care crisis is keeping moms out of work. When the pandemic led to a lack of child care, single mothers like Dennis Tyree were left in the lurch, unable to work. Coupled with the recent release of federal demographic data, this poll points to a long-term evaluation in parenthood trends in the United States. The spiraling costs of childcare, healthcare, and education, along with global instability, including the coronavirus pandemic and climate change, could all be contributing to a broader change in attitudes to marriage and priorities in life. U.S. birth rate falls to its lowest level in decades in wake of pandemic. In April, the Census Bureau reported that in the last decade the U.S. population grew at the second slowest rate for any 10-year period since the nation's founding. Pew surveyed 3,866 and non-parents online in late October as part of a broader study of nearly 10,000 U.S. adults known as the American Trans-Pedal Survey. Those who say they have no children were asked to rate their desire to have them in the future, while adults who say they already have children were asked to rate their likelihood of having more. These same questions were asked in a similar poll Pew conducted in late July to early August 2018, enabling a comparison of trends over time. There was no difference based on gender in the responses among parents and non-parents. According to Pew, men and women are equally likely to say they will probably not have kids or more kids in the future. There was a difference based on age, however, with adults in their 40s far more likely than younger adults to say they are unlikely to have any more children in the future. The Biden administration has attempted to tackle some of the roadblocks to higher fertility through its roughly $2 trillion Build Back Better bill, which recently passed the House and is now moving to the Senate. The bill includes funding for universal pre-K as well as the first national paid family and medical leave program. Part 3. Read this story. She was walking lazily for a fierce April sun was directly overhead. Her umbrella blocked its rays, but nothing blocked the heat, the short of raw, wild heat that crushed you with its energy. A few buffalo were tethered under coconuts, browsing the perch fringes. Occasionally a car went past, leaving its threads in the melting pitch like the wake of a ship at sea. Otherwise it was quiet, and she saw no one. In her long white Sunday dress you might have taken Ginny Narine for 14 of or 15. In fact, she was 12, a happy, uncomplicated child with a nature as open as the red hibiscus that decorated her black, waist-length hair. Generation earlier, her family had come to Trinidad from India as overseers on the sugar plantation. Her father had some success through buying and clearing land around Rio Cristalino and planting it with coffee. On the dusty first 20 yards ahead of Ginny a car pulled up. She had noticed it coursed by once before, but she did not recognize it and could not make out the driver through its dark windows, themselves as black as its gleaming paintwork. As she walked past it, the driver's glass started to open. "Hello, Jenny," she heard behind her. She paused and turned. A slight color rose beneath her dusky skin. Rafi Kirjani was tall and lean, and almost well dressed. His black eyes and large white teeth flashed in the sunlight as he spoke. Everyone in Rio Cristalino knew Rafi. Ginny often heard her unmarried sisters talk gratefully of him, of how if only their father were alive and they still had land, one of them might marry him, and then they would squabble over who it might be and laugh at Ginny because she was too simple for any man to want. "How do you know my name, Rafi?" she asked with a thrill. "How do you know mine? Everyone knows everyone knows your name. You are Mr. Kirjani's son, right? And where are you going, Ginny?" She hesitated and looked down at the ground again. "To Capel," she said with a faint smile. "But Ginny, good Hindus go to temple." His rich, cultured voice was gently mocking as he added with a laugh. "Or maybe the temple pundits aren't your taste in color." She blushed more deeply at the reference to Father Olivier. She did not know how to reply. It was true that she liked the young French priest, with his funny accent and blue eyes, but she had been going to the Catholic chapel for months before he arrived. She loved its cheerful hymns and its simple creed of one God, so different from those miserable Hindu gods who squabble with each other like her sister at home. But added to that, the vulgarity of Rafi's remark bewildered her because his family were known for their breeding. People always say that Rafi would be a man of honor, like his father. Ravi looked suddenly grave. His dark skin shimmered even darker. It might be that he regretted his words. Possibly he saw the confusion in Ginny's wide-brown eyes. In any case, he did not wait for any answer. "Can I offer you a lift to Capel in my 21st birthday present?" he asked, putting his sunglasses back on. She noticed how thick their frames were. Real gold, she thought, like the big fat watch on his wrist. "It's a Mercedes from Papa. Do you like it?" he added nonchalantly from the shade of her umbrella. Ginny peered up at a small lone cloud that hung motionless above them. The sun was beating down mercilessly and there was an urge in the air and an overpowering sense of growth. With a handkerchief she wiped the sweat from her forehead. Ravi gave a tug at his collar. "It's air-conditioned, Ginny, and you won't be late for Capel." He continued, reading her mind, but Capel must have been the last thing off Ravi's mind then mind when Ginny, after a moment's hesitation, accepted his offer, for he drove her instead to a quiet sugar field outside town and there with the Mercedes concealed among the sugar canes, he introduced himself into her. Jenny was in a daze. Young as she was, she barely understood what was happening to her. The beat of calypso filled her ears, and the sugar canes towered over her as the cold drove from the air conditioner played against her knees. Afterwards, clenching the regret flower that had been torn from her hair, she lay among the tall, sweet-smelling canes and sobbed until the brief tropical twilight turned to starry night. But she told no one, not even Father Olivier. 2 weeks later, the little market town of Rio Cristalino was alive with gossip. Rafi Kirjani had been promised the hand of Sunita Morpalani. Like the Kirjanis, the Morpalanis were an established Indian family, one of the wealthiest in the Caribbean. But while the Kirjanis were diplomats, the Morpalanis were a commercial family. They had made their fortune in retailing long before the collapse in oil price had emptied their customer pockets. And now Morpalani stores were scattered throughout Trinidad and some of the other islands. Prudently, they had diversified into banking and insurance, and as a result their influence was felt at the highest level. It was a benevolent influence, of course, never abused, for people always said the Morpalanis were a respectable family and well above reproach. They had houses in Port of Spain, Tobago and Barbados, as well as in England and India, but their main residence was a magnificent, sprawling colonial-style mansion just to the north of Rio Cristalino. The arranged marriage would be the social event of the following year. When Jenny heard of Rafi's engagement, the loathing she had conceived for him grew into a sort of numb hatred. She was soon haunted by a longing to repay that heartless, arrogant brute. She would give anything to humiliate him, to see the leering, conceited grin weep from his face, but outwardly she was unmoved. One weekdays she went to school, and on Sunday she went still to Father Olivier's afternoon service. Girl, you sure does have a lot to confess to the whitey, her mother would say to her each time she come home late from chapel. He's not a whitey, he's a man of God. That's that is as might be, child, but don't forget he does be a man first. The months passed, and she did not see Rafi again, and then it rained. All through August, the rain hardly stopped. It rattled persistently on the galvanized roofs until you thought you would go mad with the noise. And if it stopped, the air was as stinky as treacle and you prayed for it to rain again. Then one day in October, towards the end of the wet season, when Ginny's family were celebrating her only brother's 18th birthday, something happened that she had been dreading for weeks. She was lying in the hammock on the balcony, playing with her 6-year-old nephew Penny. Suddenly, Penny cried out, "Ginny, why are you so fat?" Throughout the little frame house, all celebrations stopped. On the balcony, curious eyes were turned upon Ginny, and you could see what the boy meant. God have mercy on you, Virginia. Where's the shape on your belly? Cried Mrs. Narin, exploding with indignation and pulling her daughter indoors, away from the praying neighbors' ears. Her voice was loud and hard, and there was a blackness in her eyes, like the blackness of the skies before thunder. How could she have been so blind? She cursed herself for it, and harsh questions burst from her lips. How does you bring such shame upon us, girl? What worthless libels does you throw yourself upon? What man will have you now? No decent man, that does be sure. And why does you blacken your father's name like this? At your age, the man as didn't even live to see you born. Thanks the gods, he didn't have to know of this. You sure got some explaining to your precious man of God child. At last her words were exhausted, and she sat down heavily, her weak heart pounding dangerously and her chest heaving from the exertion of her outburst. outburst. Then Jenny told her mother of the afternoon that Rabbi Kirjani had raped her. There was a long silence after that, and all you could hear was Mrs. Narin wheezing when at least she spoke. Her words were heavy and disjointed. If anybody have to get damnation, that Kirjani's voice will get it. She said. Jeannie's sisters were awestruck. "Shall we take her over the health center, Ma?" asked Indra. "The midwife comes today." "Is you crazy, girl? You all doesn't know how that woman does runs shimmer like a duck's bottom. You all leave, you all leave this to me." That night Mrs. Narin took her young daughter to see Dr. Khan, an old friend of her husband whose discretion she could count on. There was no doubt about it. The child was pregnant. "And what can us do, Dr. Khan?" asked Mrs. Narin. "Marry her off, quick as you can," the lean old doctor replied bluntly. Mrs. Narin scoffed. "Who would take her now, doctor? I does beg you. There's nothing you can do for us." A welcome breeze came through the slats of the surgery windows. Outside you could hear the shrill, persistent sounds of cicadas, while mosquitoes crowded at the screens, attracted by the bare bulk over the simple desk. Dr. Khan sighed and peered over the frames of his glasses. Then he lowered his voice and spoke merely, like a man who has said the same thing many times. "I might arrange something for the baby once it's born, but it must be born, my dear. Your daughter is slimly built. She is young, a child herself. To you she looks barely 3 months pregnant. Don't fool yourself. If the dates she's giving us are correct, in 3 months she will be full term. Anything now would be too messy, and if it's born," asked Mrs. Narin falteringly, "if it's brown, what does happen then?" "No, Ma, I want it anyway. I want to keep it," said Ginny quaintly. "Don't be fooled, child. It's my baby, Ma. I want I want to have it. I want to keep it. And who is to look after you and pay for the baby? Even if that Jenny does agree to pay, who does you hope to marry?" "I will marry. Don't worry. We'll marry. You does be fool." "Who will you marry?" "Kirjani, Ma is going to marry Rafi Kirjani." Dr. Khan gave a chuckle. "So your daughter is not such a fool as you think," he said. "I told you to marry her off, and the Kirjani boys were to try. What does she have to lose? She's too clever." So Fikriyahsniar was confronted with the pregnant Jenny and reminded of that Sunday afternoon in the dry season when the canes were ready for harvesting. To the surprise of the Nares, he did not argue at all. He offered at once to marry Jenny. It might be that for him it was a welcoming opportunity to escape a connubial arrangement for which he had little appetite. Though Sunita Morpalani indisputably had background, nobody ever pretended that she had looks, or possibly he foresaw awkward police questions that might have been difficult to answer once the fruit of his desire saw the light of day. Miss Neri was strange. Even Ginny was surprised at how little resistance he put up. Perhaps, she thought with a wry smile, he's not really so bad. Whatever his reason, you have to admit Rafi acted vulnerably, and so did the jilted Morpalani family. If privately they felt their humiliation keenly, publicly, publish, publicly they bore it with composure, and people were amazed that they remained of speaking terms with the man who had insulted one of their women and broken her heart. Sunita's five brothers even invited Rafi to spend a day with them at their seaside villa in Mayaro, and as Ravi had been a friend of the family all his life, he saw no reason to refuse. The Morpolani brothers chose a Tuesday for the outing. There was little point, they said, in going at the weekend when the working people littered the beach, and one of their land rovers for the 20-mile drive from Rio Cristalino. They were in high spirits and joked with Rafi while their servants stowed cold chicken and salad beneath the rear bench seats and picked the icebox with beer and passion. Then they scanned the sky for clouds and congratulate themselves on choosing such a fine day. Suraj, the oldest brother, looked at his watch, and his feet shifted uneasily as he said, "It's time to hit the road." His brothers gave a laugh and clambered on board. It was an old, sardonic laugh. The hardtop Land Rover cruised through Rio Cristalino to the crossroads at the town center. Already the market traders were pinching their roadside stalls and erecting great canvas umbrellas to shield them from sun or rain. The promise of commerce was in the air, and the traders looked about expectantly as they loaded their stalls with fresh mangoes, or put the finishing touches to the display of giant melons whose fleshly pink innards glistened succulently under cellophane. The Land Rover turned east toward Mayaro and moments later was passing the cemetery on the edge of the town. The road to the coast was busy with traffic in both directions still carrying the produce to market, and the frequent dance and potlatch made the journey slow. At last, on an uphill straight about 6 miles, the Land Rover was able to pick up the speed. Its ripped, dry tires beat on the reflector studs like a drum roll, and the early morning sun flashed through the coconut palms. Suddenly, a terrible thing happened. The rear door of the Land Rover swung open and Ravi Kirjani trombled out, falling helplessly beneath the wheels of a heavily laden truck. And at the inquest, the coroner acknowledged that the nature and extent of Rafi's injuries made it impossible to determine whether he was killed instantly by the fall or subsequently by the truck. But it was clear at least, he felt, that Rafi had been alive when he fell from the Land Rover. The verdict was that due to misadventure, 3 days later, Rafi's remains were cremated according to Hindu rites. As usual, a crush of people from all over Trinidad, distant, relatively old classmates, anyone claiming even the most tenuous connection with the dead man, came to mourn at the reversed pier outside Mayaro. Some of them were convinced that they could see in Rafi's death the hands of the gods, and pointed of evidence to the grey sky and the unseasonal rain, but the flames defied the rain of the stench of burning flesh filled the air. A few spoke darkly of murder. Did not the Morpalanis have a compelling motive? And not by chance did they have the opportunity and the means, but mostly they agreed that it was a tragic accident. It made little difference that it was Morpalani truck that had finished Rafimo. Morpalani trucks were everywhere. Then they watched as the ashes were thrown into the muddy Otoiri River, soon to be lost in the warm waters of the Atlantic. Anyway, said one old mourner with a stroke, who are we to ask questions? The police closed their files on the case before the boy was called, and he shook the last of the rain from his umbrella and slapped appallingly of a mosquito. You might have thought that the shock of Rafi's death would have induced in Ginny a premature delivery, but quite the reverse. She attended the inquest and she mourned at the funeral. The expected date came and went. 6 more weeks elapsed before Ginny, by now 13, gave birth to a son at the public maternity hospital in San Fernando. When they saw the baby, the nurses clenched anxiously at each other. Then they took him away without letting Ginny see him. Eventually they returned with one of the doctor, a big crow, who assumed his most unruffled bedside manner to reassure Ginny that the baby was well. "It's true he is a little pasty, my dear," he said as a nurse placed the baby in Ginny's arm. "But you see, that will be the late delivery. And don't forget you are very young, and you've both had a rough time. Wait a day, 3 days, his eyes will turn. He will soon have a healthy color." Ginny looked into her son's blue eyes and kissed them. In doing so, a tremendous feeling of tiredness suddenly came over her. They were so very, very blue, so like Father Olivier's. She sighed, and the irony of it all, the worst of it all, was the crow doctor really so stupid. Surely he knew as well as she did that pallid looks could never grow.